Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be just a fun little video of some of the surprising things that I've discovered while living in various different countries. Now, I've called this kind of a culture shocks video because that's sort of the tag, I guess, if you can call it that. It's what people call this category. My friend Cheryl has actually done a bunch of culture shock videos about Paris, which are really good fun to watch. But I wanted to do one that covers several of the different countries I've lived in and kind of just some of the random, small, surprising things that I did not expect from those countries. Obviously, there's loads of stuff that's different, but these are just surprising, fun things, so I hope you like it. First of all is Chile. We have lived in Chile for about 6 months altogether, so we really know it pretty well. And the first part of that is the earthquakes. I didn't realise, but living in Santiago, you have earthquakes on like a monthly basis. It's super normal. So if there's an earthquake, everyone just says like, oh, just stand still, like act casual. There's no training of you need to dive into the bath or under a table. Everyone's like, yeah, you just wait for it to pass. And we actually had some pretty big ones. I think we had one that was a 7, and we were on the 18th floor. Like the whole building is shaking and it's just no big deal. It just passes and everybody carries on. I guess if you're going to experience an earthquake, it should be in a country that has them a lot because their buildings are very well designed for earthquakes. And actually it was one of my favorite things about living in Santiago because it was kind of a bucket list thing for me, and you feel pretty safe because they know what they're doing and they have them all the time. So yeah, definitely earthquakes is one. Also the dogs in Chile, they call them community dogs, I think, but they're basically stray dogs. But everyone in the community looks after them, so you feed them. People build them like little houses in the park, so they have these little wooden kind of doll houses they live in. In the winter, people put jackets on them so they're warm. So they're all really overfed and really tame. They get on the buses, they use the traffic lights, they just wander around the city. And sometimes if you're going for a run or a walk, they'll just follow you for a while. They're just like, oh, that person looks like they're going somewhere interesting, and they'll just come off with you on a little adventure. So I absolutely love that. And then the final thing, which I think is actually true of all of South America, but you guys can let me know if you have experience there, is everybody has 2 last names. So they take their mother's maiden name and their father's surname. So they say to you, like, what's your first last name and what's your second last name? And still the dad's last name is like more significant. I guess it's kind of your last name. But you also have a first last name, which is your mum's last name. So I think that's really cool. Okay, next is Serbia. We only lived here for a month, so just a couple of small things. They are definitely bigger on unisex toilets than we are in England. A lot of the toilets seem to just be joint, which I find very weird, but kind of a good idea, why not? And also, people seem to stand really close to you. Like, I was constantly worried I was being pickpocketed, but actually Serbia seemed really super safe and you didn't really need to worry about that stuff very much. But just like in the mall or in a lift or on an escalator, people are just standing like really close to your backpack and you're just like, why are you standing so close? Are you trying to steal my stuff? But yeah, people just seem to have like a bit less personal space than we do in England. They also, where we were in Belgrade, pretty much all the nightclubs are on boats. So there's these awesome party boats that don't go anywhere. They're just moored up on the river. And that was something that I haven't really seen before, to be like the whole city, the parties are all on the boats. So when the bars close at like midnight, everyone just moves down to the river and goes to the party boats. Next is Berlin in Germany. Again, we lived here for about a month, and the main thing that we found super weird and surprising was the nightclub culture. So if you're in line for a nightclub, you have to stand just in pairs. Ideally just be on your own, but if you're in a group of like 4, 5, 6, they won't let you in. You have to just be in pairs. So before you join the line, you like separate from your friends and kind of act like you don't know them and just stay with your one other person. You have to be super cool, and there's always a guy on the door, not like a bouncer checking IDs, although they do that as well, but someone who is just judging whether you are cool enough to come into this particular club, whether you fit the right vibe. So we pretty much only wore black. It's pretty bad if you're a tourist, if you don't speak German. You're supposed to be like a cool local and you have to just act like you don't even care. You're like, whatever, I don't even want to go to your club, like just let me in. and like that's how you get in, and that was quite weird. Normally in England you just join the line when you get to the front of the line. If you're not like horrendously drunk or something, then they let you in and you pay the money. And these clubs aren't free, they're quite expensive, but you have to be cool enough or they'll just turn you away for like pretty much no reason. And the most famous one of all in Berlin is called Berghain, which is this crazy nightclub where you're not allowed to take any photos. They cover up the camera on your phone so you can't take any pictures. And it's this like world famous kind of exclusive place. It's a huge warehouse, there's thousands of people in there, but the guy on the door for that, I think I read that he's called Sven, and he's a street style fashion photographer, and getting past Sven is like a serious undertaking. Everyone buys the right outfits to try and look cool and like practices. And then there's loads of taxis just waiting outside Berghain to take away all the rejects to take them to some other part of town or some other club. So especially if you're a tourist, if you don't speak German, it's pretty hard to get into Berghain, and it's kind of famously difficult to get into this club in Berlin. Next is Koh Lanta, which is one of our favourite little islands in Thailand. You probably will have seen, I've done a few videos from there before. We absolutely love it there, but the thing that blew my mind about there is that they got electricity in 1996. Not internet, electricity. Like, what? How can you live without electricity? So I find it incredible how far they've come in that time. Like now there's loads of restaurants and hotels and businesses and taxi drivers, and there's actually probably our favourite co-work in the whole world is in Koh Lanta. They have amazing internet which never drops out. The island quite often has power cuts, but this co-work, which I'll link to in the description box, is called Co-Hub, and they have their own generator so that they don't lose internet if the whole island loses power. So it's crazy that they have only had electricity since '96. That's amazing. Next is Chiang Mai, which, as you'll know, we spend a lot of time in. It's probably my favourite place in the world to live as a nomad. And one of the things that I really miss about Chiang Mai, which I love, is how much everybody like bows. So it's kind of a sign of respect and manners. And when you pay the bill at the restaurant, the waitress or waiter will kind of be like, thank you. And when you're leaving a restaurant, I always like to say thank you for having us. You're kind of always like, thank you. And when you get out of a taxi, you say like, thank you. And I love it. I actually find when I'm in England, I still do it to people, because especially in a restaurant where I feel like there's kind of a weird hierarchy of like, you're better than them, but you don't feel like you are and you don't want it to be that way. I always end up being like, thank you, and then I'm like, oh wait, people are going to think I'm weird because I'm like bowing at them. But it's one of my favourite things about Thailand is how polite everybody is, and everyone's on a really equal level. I love it. The other thing is taking your shoes off. So pretty much whenever you go into a shop, you take your shoes off and leave them outside. It's just a manners thing, and I really like that, especially obviously in England. If you go into someone's house, you might do that, but if you go into a shop or anything, you'll probably leave your shoes outside. So that's another reason you just want little slide-on flip-flops, otherwise you're constantly going to be taking your shoes on and off with laces and stuff. And the final thing is the red trucks. So they obviously have tuk-tuks and taxis, but the red trucks, you will have seen in my Chiang Mai vlog, but they're for, I don't know, about 8 people, and they're like a cross between a taxi and a bus. So you like hail them to stop, and then you tell them where you're going, and if they're going in that kind of direction, they'll say yes, and you get in, and then they'll drop you off. But they drop off several people along the way, so it's like a personalised bus. Because they'll go to your destination, but only if it's kind of en route, and you have to stop for other people on the way. So you might do like a weird diversion to drop somebody off, and then someone else, and then finally it's you. So sometimes it takes ages to get where you're going, or sometimes it's really quick. And obviously they're cheaper than tuk-tuks because you're sharing with other people. And it's kind of this cool, like, I guess it's kind of environmentally friendly to do like a ride share, but I think it's really fun, and it took us ages to get used to. If you pull one over and they say no, you're like, why? I have money, I want you to take me somewhere. And it took me ages to realise that it was because they weren't going in that direction. Maybe they're going the opposite way entirely, so that's why they say no to you. So don't be offended if a red truck driver says no to where you're going. And finally, Australia, which is where we're living at the moment. We are here for 6 months, so we're getting fully immersed. We're in Brisbane, Queensland, and we love it. But I didn't expect Australia to have many culture shocks because I'm British and it should be pretty similar apart from the weather and the deadly animals. But actually there was a lot more that was different than I realised. The first thing we discovered was these crazy birds, which are basically like pigeons. They're just eating out of the bins and wandering around town, but they're terrifying. They look like they've come from hell. They're super freaky looking birds that I've never seen anywhere else. I put them on Instagram and one of my friends said they have them in South Africa, I think. But I've never seen them before. They're the most terrifying pigeons I've ever come across. Next is the parking, and you have to park if you're on the road, all facing the right way. I think it's the direction of travel. So you'll get a ticket if your car is facing the opposite way, which is very odd. In England, as long as you're in the space, it's fine. But in Australia, they love their rules. Everyone has to be facing the same way. And I guess it is more efficient because then when you're coming out into traffic, you're not going to be kind of trying to do a 3-point turn or cut across traffic. Like, I get why you do it, but it seems a bit overly regulated. The next one is formalities about heritage at events. So any event that you go to, like an awards ceremony or a school play or like a pitch night, anything like that, the person who is kind of hosting the event will say, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but something about we pay respect to the owners of the land and the elders, and they're basically talking about the Aboriginals, who obviously the land was stolen from them, and kind of the classic story where the English have stolen land from people who originally lived there. And I think it's really nice. They're like paying respect to the history. There's normally someone there who's kind of representing the Aboriginals who will maybe, I went to one where they sang like a kind of traditional song, but maybe they'll say something, say a few words. It's really nice. It's kind of part of the thank yous when you're thanking, like, we'd like to thank the sponsors or this company for doing the catering. They'll also pay respect to the elders and the owners of the land. And I think that's really nice. That's something that we don't have in England or in America or something, where we've just as much stolen the land from the original people. So it's a nice little nod to quite a messy past. It's a nice little way to acknowledge it, I think. Also in Australia, kind of related to the cars, there are overcautious signs about everything. If you get on the tube or on an escalator, there's so many signs about, like, don't fall off, the end of the escalator is coming, don't lean on the doors, watch out when you step up from this flippy chair because it flips up and you don't want to fall. And there's so many like panicking warning signs about everything, which seems weird because they live with deadly snakes and deadly spiders and don't seem that fussed about like crocodiles. But, you know, God forbid you get to the end of an escalator and don't realise and fall flat on your face. So they seem big into signage in Australia. And finally, for Australia, and actually for the whole video, is that everything starts really early. Like if we're getting a flight at 5 a.m, we get in a taxi and it's just the city is totally awake. Everyone's on their way to the gym or on their way to work. There's loads of taxis available. People seem to all start their day at like 4:35, 6, which in England is reasonably extreme. I guess it's partly because it gets so hot in Australia. So if you want to go for a swim, like our pool is outdoors, so we have to kind of swim at 8 or 9 before the sun is fully up, because if you go at 9 or 10, you're going to be just getting really sunburned. So I guess that's why they do it, but that to me was very foreign. So I hope that video didn't go on too long and you had some kind of fun insight into what it's like to live in some of these different countries. I would love to know if you guys have anything else to add, or if you're from any of these countries. Do you think I'm crazy for finding these weird, or what do you find weird about England? I would love to know. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Please don't forget to subscribe and support my channel. I will see you in my next video. Have a good one. Bye!